Marcus Williams had learned to count pennies before he could spell his own name, surviving on scraps while the city's skyline glittered with wealth he'd never touch. So when a cold billionaire stormed out of the struggling diner where Marcus worked double shifts, leaving behind $1,000 on the table, Marcus faced an impossible choice that would either save his dying uncle or destroy what little integrity he had left. But as he stared at that money, something his uncle had once told him about character echoed in his mind, forcing a decision no desperate man should ever have to make. And when Marcus chose to walk away from the one thing that could solve all his problems, he had no idea he just triggered a chain of events that would expose a billion-dollar conspiracy and reveal a truth so devastating it would bring an entire empire to its knees. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The fluorescent lights in Miller's roadside diner buzzed with that familiar electric hum that Marcus Williams had learned to tune out over the past 2 years. It was almost midnight, and his feet ached in a way that went deeper than just tired muscles. This was the kind of exhaustion that lived in your bones, the kind that reminded you every single day that survival wasn't a guarantee. It was a battle. Marcus wiped down table 7 for the 3rd time, even though it was already clean. The truth was, he needed something to do with his hands while he waited for his shift to end. In 20 minutes, he'd count his tips, and he already knew it wouldn't be enough. It never was. The diner sat just off the main business district, close enough to the glass towers and expensive restaurants that sometimes their overflow wandered in, but far enough that most nights it was just truckers, night shift workers, and people like Marcus who couldn't afford to eat anywhere else. The vinyl booths were cracked, the coffee was always a little too bitter, and the heating system made strange clicking noises when it rained. But it was work, and work meant rent. Maybe. Marcus, you closing out soon? Jennifer, the night manager, called from behind the counter. She was a tired woman in her 50s who wore her stress in the lines around her eyes. Yeah, just finishing up, Marcus replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't need to check it to know what it was. Debt collectors had a rhythm to their calls, a persistence that felt almost personal. 3rd notice on the electric bill. Final warning on the phone service. A letter from the landlord that he'd shoved in his bag without reading because he already knew what it said. Marcus pulled the phone out anyway and glanced at the screen. 5 missed calls. 7 text messages. All the same companies, all the same threats wrapped in professional language. He silenced it and slipped it back into his pocket. At home, his uncle was getting worse. The diabetes medication cost more than Marcus made in a week, and the free clinic could only do so much. Uncle Ray had raised him after his parents were gone, had worked double shifts at the factory to keep Marcus in school, had sacrificed everything. Now it was Marcus's turn, and he was failing. The thought sat heavy in his chest as he finished wiping down the last table. Through the wide front windows, he could see the city lights in the distance, a skyline that belonged to a world he'd never be part of. People up there in those towers didn't worry about electric bills or expired medication. They didn't know what it felt like to count coins and still come up short. Marcus, Jennifer's voice cut through his thoughts, sharp with surprise. We got a late one. Marcus turned toward the entrance and felt his stomach drop. A black luxury sedan had pulled up outside, the kind of car that cost more than most people made in 5 years. The chrome gleamed under the parking lot lights, and even from inside the diner, Marcus could see it was pristine. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. Mid-50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's entire wardrobe. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about anything. His phone pressed to his ear, his face locked in concentration. Jennifer rushed to smooth her apron, her hands shaking slightly. That's Richard Barrett, she whispered. The Richard Barrett, tech billionaire. Oh my God, what's he doing here? Marcus had heard the name. Everyone had. Barrett Technologies was one of those companies that seemed to own half the city, their logo on buildings and billboards and news articles about stock prices and expansion deals. Richard Barrett was the kind of man who appeared in business magazines, always photographed in boardrooms or private jets, always looking like he owned whatever room he walked into. The other servers had suddenly found reasons to be busy in the back. Marcus understood why. People like Richard Barrett didn't come to places like Miller's Roadside Diner because they wanted to. They came because something had gone wrong, because they were slumming it, because they'd wandered off course. And they usually made sure everyone around them paid for their inconvenience. "Marcus, you take him," Jennifer said, and it wasn't a request. Marcus grabbed a menu and walked toward the door as Richard Barrett entered. Up close, Marcus could see details the magazines never showed. The man's hands were trembling slightly. His tie was loosened, which seemed wrong for someone so put together. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his jaw was clenched tight, like he was grinding his teeth against something painful. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Miller's," Marcus said, his voice steady and professional despite the knot forming in his stomach. Richard Barrett barely glanced at him. "Table. Quiet. In the back. No please. No thank you. Just commands delivered to someone who didn't matter." Marcus led him to a corner booth, the one they usually reserved for people who wanted privacy. Richard Barrett slid into the seat without looking at Marcus, his phone still pressed to his ear. Marcus could hear fragments of the conversation, words like acquisition and board meeting and damage control, spoken in clipped, angry tones. "Can I start you with something to drink?" Marcus asked when the man finally lowered his phone. "Scotch." "Neat." Richard Barrett's eyes were still on his phone screen. "We don't have a liquor license, sir." "Coffee, soft drinks, water, or juice?" For the first time, Richard Barrett actually looked at Marcus, and there was something dangerous in his eyes. Frustration, anger, maybe even desperation. "Coffee. Black. Strong." Marcus nodded and headed to the counter. Jennifer was hovering nearby, her anxiety infectious. "Is he upset?" she whispered. "Did we do something wrong?" "He's fine." Marcus lied, because the truth wouldn't help anyone. He poured the coffee, made sure it was hot, and brought it back with a clean cup and saucer. Richard Barrett was on another phone call now, his voice low and intense. "I don't care what the projections say, we're exposed. Someone's been feeding information to Meridian Capital, and if we don't plug this leak, we're going to lose everything." He paused, listening. No more delays. I want internal security to audit every department, every executive. I don't care whose feelings get hurt." Marcus set the coffee down carefully and stepped back, trying to be invisible. But Richard Barrett's eyes flicked up to him, sharp and assessing, before returning to his phone. "Menu," the billionaire said, snapping his fingers without looking. Marcus handed it over. Richard Barrett glanced at it for maybe 3 seconds before tossing it aside. "Steak, medium rare, whatever sides you have, and more coffee." The order was delivered like every word cost him something, like speaking to someone like Marcus was beneath him. But Marcus had learned a long time ago not to take it personally. People like Richard Barrett didn't see servers as people. They saw functions, obstacles, background noise in their important lives. Marcus put the order in and brought more coffee. Richard Barrett didn't acknowledge him. The man was deep in his phone now, scrolling through emails with increasing agitation, his jaw working like he was chewing through steel. When the food came out, Marcus delivered it with the same quiet efficiency he'd perfected over 2 years of invisible service. Richard Barrett ate mechanically, barely tasting it, his attention split between his phone and a leather portfolio he'd pulled from his briefcase. "Anything else I can get you, sir?" Marcus asked. "No, just the check. I need to get out of here." Marcus printed the check and brought it over. $87 for a meal the man had barely touched. Richard Barrett pulled out a thick leather wallet, the kind that probably had more cash in it than Marcus made in a month. He yanked out several bills without counting them, tossed them on the table, and stood abruptly. "Keep the change," he muttered, already moving toward the door, his phone ringing again. Marcus watched him go, watched the black sedan peel out of the parking lot like the hounds of hell were chasing it. Then he turned back to the table to clear the dishes. The bills were scattered across the table, some still folded, some loose. Marcus gathered them mechanically, his mind already moving to the next task. Bust the table, wipe it down, reset it for morning shift. The routine was automatic. But then his hand touched something separate from the obvious payment. A folded stack of bills, tucked partially under the portfolio Richard Barrett had forgotten to take. Marcus picked it up, unfolded it slowly, and felt his heart stop. 10 $100 bills. Crisp. New. $1,000. His hand started shaking. This wasn't a tip. Tips didn't come in $1,000 bills folded separately from the payment. This was a mistake. This was money the billionaire had pulled out for something else and forgotten in his anger and distraction. $1,000. Marcus stared at it, his mind racing through calculations he'd done 100 times. Rent was $600, 2 months overdue. Uncle Ray's medication was another $300. The electric bill was $150. The phone was $90. With $1,000, he could solve everything. For the first time in 2 years, he could breathe. His legs felt weak. He sat down in the booth Richard Barrett had just vacated, the money clutched in his hands like it might disappear if he let go. Marcus! Jennifer's voice startled him. You okay? What's that? He looked up at her, and she saw the money in his hands. Her eyes went wide. Is that from him? Did he tip you $1,000? No, Marcus said, his voice hoarse. He forgot it, left it on the table. Jennifer stared at him, then at the money, then back at him. Well, if it was on the table, it's yours. That's the rule. Whatever's left on the table belongs to the server. Marcus shook his head. That's for tips, not for stuff people forget. Marcus, honey, you don't even know if he forgot it. Maybe he meant to leave it. Rich people do crazy things. She sat down across from him, her voice dropping to something softer. I know how much you need this. We all do. No one would blame you. I would, Marcus said quietly. But even as he said it, his mind was screaming at him. This could solve everything. This could save Uncle Ray. This could give him a chance to catch up, to stop drowning for just 1 month. Who would even know? Richard Barrett probably had so much money he wouldn't even notice it was gone. It was nothing to him. It was everything to Marcus. Deacon, the night cook, walked past with a bag of trash. He saw the money and let out a low whistle. Damn, kid. Fate finally paying you back for all the bad hands you've been dealt. Marcus folded the bills carefully, his hands still trembling. He should give it back. He knew he should. But how? He didn't have the billionaire's number. Didn't know where he lived. And even if he did, would anyone believe a poor black server trying to return money to a billionaire? Or would they call the police, assume he'd stolen it? I need to think, Marcus said, standing up. Jennifer touched his arm. Marcus, I know you. I know your heart. But sometimes you have to let yourself catch a break. This is a break. Take it. Marcus pocketed the money and finished his shift in a daze. When he finally clocked out and counted his regular tips, the numbers felt meaningless. $32 for a double shift. Not even enough for groceries. Outside, the night air was cold. Marcus walked to the bus stop, his hand in his pocket, fingers touching the folded bills like they might burn through his skin. The bus ride home took 40 minutes, and every minute felt like an hour. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that should have been condemned years ago. The hallway smelled like mildew and old cooking oil. Marcus unlocked 3 separate locks on his door and stepped inside. Uncle Ray was asleep in the recliner, the TV playing on mute. His breathing was labored, that wet rattle that had been getting worse for months. Pill bottles covered the side table, most of them empty. Marcus stood in the doorway and looked at the man who'd raised him. Uncle Ray had worked himself into disability to give Marcus a chance. Had paid for school supplies and field trips and everything else parents were supposed to provide. Had never once made Marcus feel like a burden, even when times got hard. Now Uncle Ray needed him, and Marcus was failing. He pulled the money out of his pocket and set it on the kitchen table next to a stack of overdue notices. The eviction letter sat on top, 3 days away from becoming real. The electricity shut-off notice promised darkness by the end of the week. The phone company had already sent 2 final warnings. $1,000 would solve all of it. Marcus sat down at the table and put his head in his hands. His mind drifted back to another time, another restaurant, when he was 15 years old. Uncle Ray had taken him to a nice place for his birthday, the kind of restaurant they couldn't really afford. The bill had come, and Uncle Ray had paid with cash he'd been saving for months. They'd gotten halfway home before Marcus found an extra $50 in Uncle Ray's coat pocket. Someone at the restaurant had made a mistake with the change. Uncle Ray had driven all the way back, walked inside, and returned the money to a shocked manager. "But we needed that," Marcus had said in the car afterward. "That was our grocery money." "I know," Uncle Ray had replied, "but it wasn't ours to keep. And you're watching, Marcus. You're always watching. What I do now teaches you who to be later." Marcus lifted his head and stared at the money on the table. He thought about Richard Barrett, the trembling hands, the angry phone calls, the weight the man carried even through all his wealth. He thought about the mistake, the forgotten money, the moment of human error. He thought about who he wanted to be. Slowly, Marcus pulled out a pen and the receipt from dinner. On the back, in careful handwriting, he wrote, "Someone once lost everything because nobody returned what wasn't theirs." He folded the $1,000 carefully, placed it inside an envelope he found in a drawer, and sealed it. Then he wrote an address he didn't have yet on the front, knowing he'd have to find it. Uncle Ray stirred in his chair. "Marcus? That you?" "Yeah, Uncle Ray. I'm home. Good shift." Marcus looked at the envelope in his hands, at the bills on the table, at the man who'd taught him everything that mattered. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think so." That night, Marcus barely slept. The envelope sat on his nightstand like a living thing, questioning him. The bills on the kitchen table screamed at him. His phone buzzed with more missed calls, more threats, more reminders that he was running out of time. But when morning came, Marcus got dressed, tucked the envelope carefully in his jacket pocket, and headed back to the diner early. He found Jennifer opening up, and she looked surprised to see him. "Marcus? You're not on until tonight." "I know. I need the name of the company from last night's reservation." "The Billionaire." Jennifer frowned. "What?" "I need to return something." She studied him for a long moment, and something sad passed across her face. "You're really going to do this, aren't you?" "I have to." She sighed and pulled out the reservation log. "Barrett Technologies. Main office is downtown, the Sterling building." "But Marcus, you can't just walk in there. Security won't let you pass the lobby." "I'll figure it out." Jennifer grabbed his arm before he could leave. "Marcus, I'm going to say this once, and then I'll never mention it again. You have a chance to change your life, to help your uncle, to stop struggling for just a little while. Are you really going to throw that away for a man who wouldn't do the same for you?" Marcus met her eyes. "Probably not, but that's why I have to do it." The Sterling building stood 60 stories tall in the heart of downtown, all glass and steel and power. Marcus stood across the street and stared up at it, feeling smaller than he'd ever felt in his life. His jacket was old, his shoes were worn, and he knew exactly what he looked like compared to the people streaming in and out of the revolving doors. He crossed the street anyway. The lobby was intimidating in a way designed to make people like Marcus turn around. Marble floors, modern art that probably cost more than cars. Security guards in expensive uniforms watching everyone like hawks. A reception desk that looked like it belonged in a museum. Marcus walked up to the desk, the envelope clutched in his hand. The receptionist looked up, saw him, and something shifted in her expression. Not quite disgust, but close. "Dismissal. Can I help you?" Her voice was cold, professional, the kind of tone that really meant you don't belong here. "I need to see Richard Barrett." She actually laughed. "I'm sorry. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I need to." "Mr. Barrett doesn't take walk-ins. If you'd like to submit a formal request through our website, someone from his team will review it within 6 to 8 weeks. This can't wait 6 to 8 weeks. He left something at the restaurant where I work, and I need to return it." The receptionist's expression went from dismissive to suspicious. "Left something? What exactly?" Marcus hesitated. He couldn't say $1,000 without it sounding insane. "It's personal. I just need 5 minutes." "That's not possible. If you have property belonging to Mr. Barrett, you can leave it with security, and they'll make sure it's returned to him." "No, I need to give it to him directly." "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. If you don't, I'll call security." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, hot and familiar. This was the world, wasn't it? The same world that pushed people like him down and kept people like Richard Barrett up. The same world that made sure the gap between them never closed. He could have solved all his problems. Instead, he was being threatened by a receptionist who probably made more in a week than he did in a month. "I'm not leaving until someone listens to me," Marcus said quietly. The receptionist picked up her phone. Two security guards started moving toward him. Marcus stood his ground, the envelope in his hand, knowing how this looked. A poor black man refusing to leave a billionaire's building. He could see how it would end. But before the guards reached him, a door opened near the back of the lobby. A woman in her 30s, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a tablet, walked past. She glanced at Marcus, then at the guards, then back at Marcus. Something in her face changed. "Wait," she said, holding up a hand to the guards. She walked over to Marcus, studying him with sharp, intelligent eyes. "You said you have something for Mr. Barrett?" "Yes, ma'am. He left it at the restaurant where I work." "And you came all the way here to return it?" "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" Marcus met her eyes. "Because it's not mine." The woman stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Come with me." The receptionist started to protest, but the woman silenced her with a look. She led Marcus past security, into an elevator, and up to a floor that required a keycard. The hallway was quiet, expensive, lined with offices that had real doors instead of cubicles. "I'm Sarah Chun," the woman said as they walked. "Junior executive in mergers and acquisitions. I was in the lobby because I forgot my briefcase." "Lucky for you." "Thank you for listening," Marcus said. "Don't thank me yet." She stopped outside a conference room and turned to face him. "Before I take you any further, I need to see what you're returning." Marcus handed her the envelope. Sarah opened it, looked inside, and her entire body went rigid. She stared at the money, then at Marcus, then back at the money. "This is $1,000. "Yes, ma'am." "And you walked in here to return it?" "Yes, ma'am." "Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just keep it?" Marcus hesitated, then told the truth. "Because someone once taught me that what you do when nobody's watching is who you really are." Sarah closed the envelope and looked at Marcus with something that might have been respect, or might have been pity. He couldn't tell. "Wait here," she said, and disappeared into another office. Marcus stood in the hallway and waited. Minutes passed. 10. 15. He started to wonder if this was all a mistake, if he just handed over $1,000 to a stranger who had no intention of giving it back. Then the door opened, and Sarah reappeared. But this time, she wasn't alone. Two men in security uniforms flanked her, and her expression had gone cold. "Come with us," she said. Marcus's stomach dropped. "What's going on?" "We have some questions for you." They led him down another hallway, through another locked door, and into a small, windowless room that looked like an interrogation cell. A metal table, 3 chairs, a camera in the corner. One of the security men pointed to a chair. "Seat." Marcus sat, his heart pounding. This was wrong. This was all wrong. "Empty your pockets," the other guard said. "Why? What did I do?" "Empty your pockets. Now." Marcus pulled out his wallet, his phone, his keys, his work ID from the diner. A few coins. The guards examined everything, even turning his wallet inside out. One of them took his phone and scrolled through it without asking permission. "How'd you get this money?" the first guard asked. "I told you. Richard Barrett left it at the restaurant." "How do we know you didn't take it from him? How do we know there wasn't more?" Marcus felt his anger boiling over. "You think I stole from him? Why would I bring it back if I stole it? Maybe you got scared. Maybe you thought we'd trace it. Maybe you're trying to get close to Mr. Barrett for other reasons." "That's insane. I'm just trying to do the right thing." The guard leaned forward. "People like you don't just walk away from $1,000. It doesn't make sense. So I'm going to ask you one more time. What's your angle?" "People like you." The words hit Marcus like a punch. He knew exactly what they meant. Poor, black, desperate, criminal. "I don't have an angle," Marcus said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "I'm trying to return something that doesn't belong to me. That's it. That's all." The guards exchanged looks. One of them left the room with Marcus's phone. The other stayed, watching him like he might bolt. Marcus sat there, trapped, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. 30 minutes passed. An hour. Marcus lost track of time. His mind kept going back to Uncle Ray, to the bills on the kitchen table, to the medication they couldn't afford. He'd given up everything for this, and now he was being treated like a criminal. Finally, the door opened. But it wasn't the guard. It was Richard Barrett. The billionaire stood in the doorway, the envelope in his hand, his expression unreadable. He looked at Marcus for a long moment, then at the guard, then back at Marcus. "Leave us," he said quietly. The guard hesitated. Sir, we haven't finished questioning. I said leave. The guard left. The door closed. Richard Barrett pulled out a chair and sat down across from Marcus. He placed the envelope on the table between them and stared at it like it might bite him. Sarah told me what happened, he said finally. You walked into my building to return this. Yes, sir. Why? Marcus was tired of that question. Because it's not mine. That's not an answer. You could have kept it. No one would have known. I wouldn't have even noticed it was gone until I needed it. By then, it would have been impossible to trace. Richard Barrett leaned forward. So, I'm going to ask you again, and I want a real answer. Why? Marcus met his eyes. Because someone once lost everything because nobody returned what wasn't theirs. And I won't be that person. I can't be. Richard Barrett went very still. His hands, which had been resting on the table, started trembling. What did you just say? I said someone once lost everything because... Where did you learn to say that? Marcus frowned, confused. I didn't learn it anywhere. I thought about it last night. About what keeping this would mean. Richard Barrett pulled the envelope toward him and opened it. He took out the receipt, the one with Marcus's note on the back, and read it again. Then he looked up at Marcus, and there was something broken in his eyes. Sarah showed me this, he said quietly. This note, these words. His voice cracked slightly. Do you know why this disturbs me? No, sir. Because 12 years ago, a man I worked with said almost exactly the same thing to me. He was trying to convince me not to sign a document that would have covered up some financial irregularities. He said that if we didn't do the right thing, someone would lose everything because we chose to look away. Richard Barrett's hands were shaking harder now. I didn't listen to him. I signed the document. And that man disappeared 3 days later. The room felt like all the air had been sucked out of it. What was his name? Marcus asked, though he already knew. He could feel it in his bones. David Williams, Richard Barrett said. Why? Did you know him? Marcus couldn't breathe. His chest felt tight, his vision blurring at the edges. David Williams. His father. The man who'd vanished when Marcus was 11 years old, leaving behind nothing but questions and poverty and a family that never recovered. He was my father, Marcus whispered. Richard Barrett's face went white. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He stared at Marcus like he'd seen a ghost, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Your father, he repeated. David Williams was your father. Yes, sir. That's not possible. That's not. Richard Barrett ran his hands through his hair, his composure cracking. How old are you? 23. And your father disappeared when? I was 11. 12 years ago. The math lined up perfectly. Richard Barrett sat back down slowly, like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. I need you to tell me everything. Your father, what happened to him, what you know. So Marcus told him. He told him about the day his father didn't come home from work, about the police investigation that went nowhere, about the company's official statement that David Williams had resigned and moved overseas, about the years of poverty that followed, the foster care, the uncle who eventually took him in, about growing up knowing his father had been erased from existence, and no one cared enough to find out why. Richard Barrett listened to all of it with his head in his hands, and when Marcus finished, the billionaire looked up with tears in his eyes. I did this, he said hoarsely. I chose the company over him. I chose my career over his life. And I've lived with that guilt every single day since. What happened? Marcus asked. What did he find? Financial fraud. Executives were creating shell accounts and siphoning money through fake subsidiaries. Your father found proof. He brought it to me, to the board, to everyone who would listen. And they silenced him. I don't know how. I don't know where he went. But one day he was there, fighting, and the next day he was gone, and the company said he'd resigned. Richard Barrett's voice broke. I should have fought harder. I should have protected him. Instead, I convinced myself it was handled, that he'd gotten a payout and left. I knew it was a lie. I knew. And I did nothing. Marcus felt rage and grief warring in his chest. This man, this billionaire sitting across from him, had chosen comfort over his father's life, had chosen money over justice, had let David Williams disappear into nothing. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked, his voice hard. Because that $1,000? Richard Barrett gestured to the envelope. It was part of an emergency cash reserve tied to the same account your father died, trying to expose. I keep it with me as a reminder of what I lost that day. Why I gave up. And when you returned it, when I saw that note. He looked at Marcus with desperate eyes. It was like he was speaking to me through you. He's not speaking through me, Marcus said coldly. He's dead. Because of you. I know. I know. Richard Barrett's composure was completely gone now. But maybe there's a way to make this right. Maybe if we work together. Work together? Marcus laughed bitterly. You want me to work with the man who killed my father? I didn't kill him. You might as well have. Silence filled the room, heavy and poisonous. Richard Barrett stared at the table, at the envelope, at the ghost of choices that couldn't be unmade. You're right, he said finally. I have no right to ask anything of you. But I'm going to anyway, because I owe your father a debt I can never repay, and because you deserve the truth. He looked up at Marcus. Something's happening in my company right now. The same corruption your father found. It's still there. It's gotten worse. Someone's feeding information to competitors, someone's stealing from accounts, and I think they know I'm getting close to exposing them. That's why I was at your diner that night. I was running, hiding, trying to figure out my next move. What does this have to do with me? Everyone around me is compromised. Everyone. I can't trust my executives, my security, my board. But you, Richard Barrett gestured to the envelope. You proved something. You proved you can't be bought. And right now, that makes you the only person in this entire building I can trust. Marcus shook his head. You're insane. I'm a food server. I don't know anything about corporate fraud or investigations or whatever this is. I don't need you to know anything. I just need you to be exactly who you already are. Richard Barrett leaned forward. Help me finish what your father started. Help me expose these people. Help me get justice for him. Justice. Marcus's voice rose. Justice would be my father being alive. Justice would be me not growing up in foster care. Justice would be my uncle not dying because we can't afford his medication. He stood abruptly. You want to feel better about yourself? Fine. Write me a check. Give me enough money to solve my problems, and we'll call it even. I can do that, Richard Barrett said quietly. I can write you a check right now for more money than you'd make in 10 years. But we both know that's not justice. That's just guilt. He stood as well. Your father died trying to make things right. Don't you want to know the whole truth? Don't you want to see the people who did this pay for it? Marcus wanted to say no. He wanted to walk out, take the money, save Uncle Ray, and forget any of this ever happened. But something in his chest wouldn't let him. Some piece of his father that lived in him, that had written that note, that had returned $1,000 even when it hurt. If I say yes, Marcus said slowly, what happens? You work with me, quietly. We investigate from the inside. We find proof of what's happening, and we expose it. All of it. No cover-ups this time. No looking away. Richard Barrett's voice hardened. I owe your father that much. I owe you that much. Marcus looked at the envelope on the table, at the money he'd returned, at the choice that had brought him to this moment. He thought about his father, about the values Uncle Ray had taught him, about the person he wanted to be. One condition, Marcus said. When this is over, whatever we find, whatever happens, the truth gets told. All of it, including what you did 12 years ago. Richard Barrett flinched, but nodded. Including what I did 12 years ago. Then I'll help you. They shook hands across the table. Two men from different worlds bound by a forgotten stack of bills and a ghost who refused to stay buried. Marcus didn't know it yet, but that handshake had just signed him up for something far more dangerous than he could imagine. Outside the office, someone was watching. A security feed. A careful observer. Someone who'd been waiting 12 years for the Williams name to resurface. And now had. After agreeing to investigate together, Marcus found himself thrust into a world he'd only seen from the outside. Richard Barrett led him through secured corridors, past glass-walled conference rooms where executives in expensive suits discussed mergers and acquisitions, past sleek offices with views that stretched across the entire city. Every face they passed registered the same confusion. Who was this man in worn clothes walking beside their CEO? Richard's private office occupied the entire top-floor corner. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the skyline Marcus had stared at from his apartment window, that distant world of light and power. Now he was inside it, and it felt wrong, like wearing someone else's skin. "Sit," Richard said, gesturing to a leather chair that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. The billionaire moved to a bar cart and poured himself scotch without offering Marcus anything. The slight stung more than it should have. "Tell me about your childhood," Richard said, settling behind his massive desk. "Where did you grow up?" "Westbrook," Marcus replied. "South Side. My dad worked for you until I was 11. Then he disappeared. My mom died when I was 7. Uncle Ray took me in when I aged out of foster care at 18. Richard's hand tightened around his glass. "Westbrook. I grew up there too before." He gestured vaguely at the office, the empire, the life he'd built. "I haven't been back in 30 years. It hasn't changed much. Still poor. Still forgotten. Your father, he never mentioned you work for me. Never talked about family. He kept work and home separate. Said it was safer that way." Marcus met Richard's eyes. Guess he was right. Before Richard could respond, his office door burst open. A woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled back severely, strode in with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Her eyes swept over Marcus with undisguised contempt. "Richard, what is this?" Her voice carried the sharp edge of authority. "Security just informed me you brought an unauthorized civilian into a restricted executive floor. This doesn't concern you, Patricia. Everything that happens in this building concerns me. I'm a chief operating officer." Patricia Sterling crossed her arms. "Who is he, and why is he here?" "He's helping me with a private matter." "What kind of private matter requires bringing a stranger into your office during a corporate crisis?" Her eyes narrowed. "We have a board meeting in 3 hours. Meridian Capital is circling like sharks. Our stock is dropping, and you're playing games with civilians?" Richard stood slowly, and something dangerous entered his voice. "Patricia, I suggest you leave. Now, I suggest you remember who helped you build this company, who stood beside you when things got difficult." She glanced at Marcus again, her lip curling. "Don't make choices you'll regret, Richard." She left, but the threat lingered in the air like smoke. "That's Patricia Sterling," Richard said quietly. "My COO for 20 years. We built this company together." He drained his scotch. "I don't know if I can trust her anymore. I don't know if I can trust anyone." "Then why trust me?" "Because you already proved yourself. The money. The note. You could have walked away." Richard pulled out a leather portfolio and spread papers across his desk. "These are financial reports from the last 3 years. Subtle discrepancies, payments that don't quite match invoices, expenses that disappear into bureaucratic language. Nothing obvious. Nothing that would trigger automatic audits. But it's there." Marcus leaned forward, studying the documents. Numbers swam across pages, meaningless to someone without accounting training. But even he could see patterns. Large payments to companies with vague names, transfers approved by the same handful of executives, money flowing out and never coming back. "How much?" Marcus asked. "Conservatively? 70 million over 3 years." The number was so large it felt abstract. Marcus couldn't even imagine that much money. "And you think the same people who went after my father are behind this?" "I know they are. The patterns match. The same departments, the same approval chains, even some of the same shell companies." Richard's jaw tightened. "Your father found the beginning of this. They spent 12 years perfecting it. So why haven't you gone to the authorities?" "Because I don't know who's involved yet. If I go public with incomplete evidence, they'll destroy it and disappear. I need proof. Ironclad, undeniable proof." Richard looked up at Marcus. "And I need someone they don't know to watch. Someone they won't suspect. You want me to spy for you. I want you to be my eyes where mine can't reach." Marcus sat back, reality settling over him like cold water. "I don't know anything about corporate finance or fraud investigation. I serve food. You don't need to know anything. You just need to watch and listen." Richard pulled out a laminated badge with Marcus's photo already on it. They must have taken it from security footage. "Starting tomorrow, you're my personal assistant. You'll attend meetings, handle scheduling, stay close to me. Everyone will assume you're just another employee. but you'll be watching. Marcus took the badge, feeling its weight. And what do I tell Uncle Ray? My manager? Everyone who knows I work at a diner. Tell them you got a better job. Tell them you're working for a corporate office. It's not even a lie. Richard's expression softened slightly. And I'll make sure your uncle gets the medical care he needs. Full coverage, best doctors, everything. Consider it a down payment on what I owe your father. Pride warred with desperation in Marcus's chest. He didn't want Richard Barrett's charity. But Uncle Ray was dying, and pride couldn't cure diabetes. Fine, Marcus said, but this isn't about the money. This is about my father. I know. The next week passed in a blur. Marcus called Jennifer at the diner and quit, her protests fading into understanding when he explained he'd gotten an office job. He didn't mention whose office. He moved Uncle Ray to a private medical facility where doctors actually had time to listen, where medications were dispensed without checking insurance first, where the rooms had windows and the staff smiled. How'd you afford this? Uncle Ray asked from his new hospital bed, looking better than he had in months. Got lucky, Marcus lied. Got hired by someone who pays well. Lucky. Uncle Ray studied him with knowing eyes. You're lying to me, son, but I trust you. Whatever you're doing, be careful. Marcus promised he would, even though he already knew it was a lie. Barrett Technologies operated like a machine made of glass and secrets. Marcus learned the rhythms. Morning briefings where executives performed carefully rehearsed confidence. Afternoon meetings where numbers were discussed in coded language. Evening sessions where Richard met with lawyers and accountants who all looked worried. Marcus's role as personal assistant meant he was everywhere and nowhere. He carried files, took notes, brought coffee, and sat in corners during meetings where millions of dollars changed hands with a signature. People looked through him the way they always had. To them, he was furniture. Help. Someone too insignificant to matter, which meant they didn't guard their words around him. The Meridian deal is still alive, an executive named Thomas Walsh said during one meeting. He was younger than Richard, hungry-looking, with the kind of ambition that felt dangerous. But we need to move fast before the board forces consolidation. The board doesn't force anything, Patricia Sterling replied coldly. Richard controls majority voting shares. For now, Walsh's smile didn't reach his eyes. But voting shares can be diluted if enough irregularities emerge, especially during an SEC investigation. The room went quiet. Richard's face remained neutral, but Marcus saw his hand tighten on his pen. There is no SEC investigation, Richard said carefully. Not yet. Walsh leaned back. But given recent market volatility, it's only a matter of time before someone requests one. Best to have our house in order before that happens. It was a threat wrapped in concern. Marcus wrote it down, his hands steady even as his mind raced. After the meeting, Richard pulled Marcus aside into a secure data room few people could access. Metal walls, no windows, computer terminals that required fingerprint authorization. Did you hear that? Richard asked. Walsh knows something, or thinks he does. He's been pushing for the Meridian deal for months. Want me to sell controlling interest to their investment group. Richard pulled up financial files on a screen. I've been tracking his access history. He's been viewing accounts he shouldn't touch, running reports on divisions outside his authority. You think he's the leak? I think he's part of it. But he's not smart enough to run an operation this sophisticated. Richard's face hardened. Someone higher up is pulling strings. Over the next few days, Marcus watched Walsh carefully. The executive moved through the building like he owned it, confident and careless. He took long lunches with people who didn't work for Barrett Technologies. He made phone calls in empty conference rooms, his voice low but not quite quiet enough. Marcus started carrying his phone everywhere, voice recorder app always ready. He learned to position himself near air vents and thin walls, learned which bathroom stalls shared walls with offices, learned the art of being invisible while listening to everything. The old man's getting paranoid, Walsh said during one phone call Marcus overheard. He's brought in some nobody to watch his back. Probably just another yes man. Marcus recognized the voice on the other end, Patricia Sterling. Richard's always been too sentimental, Patricia replied. That's why this company needs new leadership. Someone who understands that business isn't about loyalty, it's about results. The documents are ready? Almost. Another week, maybe two. Then we move. Marcus's blood ran cold. He recorded every word. That evening, he brought the recording to Richard. The billionaire listened in silence, his face draining of color. "Patricia," Richard whispered. "She's been with me since the beginning. She's planning something. A coup, maybe." Richard played the recording again, his hands shaking. "I built this company with her. We survived the early years together, the failures, the risks. I trusted her with everything. She's betraying you." "No." Richard's voice cracked. "She's finishing what she started 12 years ago." He looked up at Marcus, and there was horror in his eyes. "Your father. He found irregularities in Patricia's department. She's the one who reported him for theft to cover her own tracks. She's the one who convinced me he was lying." His face crumpled. "And I believed her. God help me, I believed her." The weight of it settled over them both. Patricia Sterling hadn't just stolen money. She destroyed David Williams. She'd erased him to protect her operation. "We need proof," Marcus said quietly. "Recording conversations isn't enough. We need documents, account numbers, transfers we could trace." Richard nodded slowly, composing himself. "There's a secure server in Patricia's office. She doesn't know. I have override access to every terminal in the building. Can you get into it remotely? Not without triggering security alerts. Someone would have to physically access her computer." Richard looked at Marcus. "After hours, when she's gone, you want me to break into her office? I want you to get justice for your father." Marcus should have said no, should have walked away. This was no longer about returning forgotten money or honoring Uncle Ray's lessons. This was corporate espionage, illegal entry, theft of proprietary information. If he got caught, he'd go to prison. But Patricia Sterling had destroyed his father, had left him to grow up in poverty, had stolen 12 years of his life. "How do I get in?" Marcus asked. The next night, Marcus stayed late under the pretense of organizing Richard's files. The building emptied slowly, first the junior employees, then middle management, finally the executives. By 9 o'clock, only security and maintenance remained. Marcus had Patricia's key card, cloned from when he'd accidentally bumped into her that morning. He had Richard's override codes. He had a flash drive that would copy her entire hard drive in under 3 minutes. What he didn't have was confidence. The executive floor felt different at night. Shadows stretched across empty cubicles. The city lights beyond the windows turned the glass walls into mirrors, showing Marcus his own reflection, a poor black kid from Westbrook who had no business being here. Patricia's office was at the far end of the floor. Marcus moved quietly, his heart hammering. He swiped the clone key card. The lock clicked open. Inside, Patricia's office was immaculate. Everything precisely arranged, not a paper out of place. Her computer sat on a glass desk, screen dark, waiting. Marcus slid into her chair and powered it on. The login screen appeared. Marcus entered Richard's override codes, praying they'd work. Access denied. Marcus tried again, carefully typing each character. Access denied. His hands started sweating. Richard had been certain the override would work. Unless Patricia had anticipated this. Unless she'd changed security protocols. Marcus pulled out his phone and texted Richard. Override not working. The response came immediately. Try executive emergency bypass. Code 1847 Williams. Marcus froze. Williams. His father's name. Richard had used his father's name as the bypass code. He entered it, and the system unlocked. Files bloomed across the screen. Dozens of folders, hundreds of documents. Marcus inserted the flash drive and started copying everything. The progress bar crept forward. 5%, 12%, 23%. That's when he heard footsteps in the hallway. Marcus's entire body locked up. The footsteps were coming closer. He couldn't stop the download. Pulling the drive now would corrupt the files. He couldn't hide. There was nowhere to go. The footsteps stopped outside Patricia's office. The door handle turned. Marcus did the only thing he could. He minimized the download window and pulled up a random file, trying to look like he was supposed to be there. The door opened. Patricia Sterling stood in the entrance, her face registering shock then fury. "What are you doing in my office?" Marcus's mind raced. "Mr. Barrett asked me to retrieve a file. He said you'd left it on your computer. Richard would never ask you to enter my office after hours." Patricia stepped inside, her eyes going to the computer screen. "What file?" "The Henderson merger documents. He needs them for tomorrow's meeting." "We don't have a meeting tomorrow." Patricia's voice went cold. "And there is no Henderson merger." She reached for her phone. "Security, I need you on the executive floor immediately." The download bar hit 89%. Marcus needed another minute. "Just one more minute." "I must have misunderstood," Marcus said, standing slowly. "I apologize." "You'll do more than apologize. Breaking into executive offices is grounds for arrest." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Who are you, really? What does Richard think he's doing with you?" 96%. "I'm just his assistant." "Assistants don't break into offices." Patricia moved closer. "What did you copy?" "Nothing. I just got here." 99%. Patricia looked past him at the computer, and her face went white. She saw the download bar, saw the flash drive, saw everything falling apart. "You son of a bitch," she whispered. 100%. Marcus grabbed the flash drive and ran. He bolted past Patricia, out into the hallway, toward the emergency stairs. Behind him, Patricia was screaming into her phone, her voice shrill with panic. "Lock down the building. Lock it down now." Marcus hit the stairwell at full speed, taking steps 3 at a time. Behind him, doors slammed open. Security alarms began wailing. Red emergency lights flashed in the corridor. He made it to the ground floor just as steel shutters started descending over the exits. Marcus dove under one, rolled, came up running. The lobby security guard shouted at him, but Marcus was already out the front doors into the cold night air, running like his life depended on it. Because it did. He ran 3 blocks before ducking into an alley. His phone buzzed. "Richard, where are you?" Marcus texted back. "Got it. Got out. She knows. Meet me at the Westbrook address." The old factory. Marcus stared at his phone. The old factory in Westbrook was abandoned, had been for years. Why would Richard want to meet there? But he didn't have time to question it. Police sirens were already screaming in the distance. Marcus pocketed his phone, the flash drive, and started moving. The factory sat on the edge of Westbrook, a hulking corpse of brick and broken windows. Marcus had played here as a kid, before the city condemned it. Now it was just another piece of forgotten architecture, slowly being reclaimed by rust and weeds. Richard's black sedan was parked outside. Marcus approached carefully, every instinct screaming that this was wrong. Richard emerged from the shadows, his face haggard. "You got it." Marcus held up the flash drive. "Everything on her computer. But she caught me. She knows." "Good." The word didn't make sense. Marcus frowned. "Good. We needed her to panic. Panic makes people sloppy." Richard took the flash drive. "This is evidence, but it's not enough. We need her to move money, to contact her partners, to do something that proves active theft. Right now, it's just files that could be explained away. You used me as bait. I used you as a catalyst." Richard's expression was unreadable. "Patricia will reach out to whoever she's working with. They'll try to move assets, cover tracks, maybe even run. And when they do, we'll catch them." Marcus felt sick. "You could have told me. If you'd known, you wouldn't have run the same way. Wouldn't have looked genuinely scared." Richard's voice softened. "I am sorry, but your father died for this. I won't let his sacrifice mean nothing." "Don't." Marcus's voice shook with anger. "Don't use my father to justify manipulating me." "You're right. I am sorry." Richard handed back the flash drive. "But we're close now. Closer than we've ever been. Patricia's going to make a mistake, and when she does, we'll have her." Marcus wanted to throw the drive in Richard's face and walk away. Wanted to go back to his simple life of serving food and counting tips. But Uncle Ray's face flashed in his mind. His father's disappearance. 12 years of lies. "What now?" Marcus asked. "Now we wait. And watch." Richard pulled out his phone and showed Marcus a tracking app. Several dots blinked across a map of the city. "I planted trackers on Patricia's phone, Walsh's phone, and 3 other executives I suspect. When they move, we'll know." One of the dots was moving. Patricia Sterling, leaving Barrett Technologies. Heading not home, but toward the financial district. She's going to meet someone, Richard said. Let's see who. They followed at a distance, Richard's driver navigating through late-night traffic. Patricia's car stopped outside an upscale restaurant, the kind with valet parking and doormen. She went inside, and 10 minutes later, another car arrived. Thomas Walsh stepped out. There's our connection, Richard murmured. But then a third car arrived. This one was different, a town car with government plates. A woman in her 50s emerged, briefcase in hand, face Marcus didn't recognize. Richard went rigid. That's Diane Foster. SEC commissioné. The SEC? Marcus felt his stomach drop. Patricia's meeting with the SEC? She's not meeting with them. Richard's face had gone pale. She's reporting us. She's going to frame me for the theft before we can expose her. Everything clicked into place. Patricia wasn't panicking. She was attacking. She'd use Marcus's break-in as evidence of Richard's desperation, spin the investigation as a witch hunt, paint herself as the loyal executive trying to stop a corrupt CEO. We need to get that information to authorities first, Marcus said. Tonight. Right now. It's not enough. We have files, but she'll claim they're fabricated. We need something undeniable. Richard's jaw tightened. We need to find your father. Marcus's world tilted. What? The settlement I showed you. The one that supposedly paid for his death overseas. Richard turned to face Marcus fully. I've been tracking those payments. They didn't go to a morgue or a government agency. They went to a private medical facility. I think your father is alive, Marcus, and I think Patricia knows where he is. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. His father had been gone for 12 years. Dead or disappeared or erased, but not alive. Not somewhere Patricia Sterling could find him. You're lying, Marcus whispered. I'm not. I've known for a week, since we started investigating. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure and I didn't want to give you false hope. Richard's voice cracked. But if we can find him, if he's alive, he can testify to everything. He's the only witness who can prove Patricia's guilt from 12 years ago. Marcus couldn't breathe. His father, alive. After all these years, all this pain, all the nights wondering if he'd done something wrong, if he could have saved him somehow. Where? Marcus demanded. Where is he? I don't know yet. The payments are routed through shell companies, but there's a pattern. Facilities in 3 states, all connected to a medical logistics firm Patricia has ties to. Richard grabbed Marcus's shoulders. Help me find him. Please, let me make this right. Marcus looked at this man who'd failed his father, who'd manipulated him, who'd brought him into this nightmare. This man who might be his only chance at finding the truth. If you're lying to me, Marcus said quietly, if this is another manipulation, I will destroy you. If I'm lying, I'll deserve it. They drove through the night, following digital trails and paper records, hunting for a ghost. And somewhere in the darkness, Patricia Sterling made her first call to the authorities, setting in motion a chain of events that would either bring justice or bury them all. The pieces were moving. The trap was closing. And Marcus Williams was about to discover that some disappearances weren't endings at all. They were imprisonments. The hunt for David Williams consumed the next 72 hours. Marcus barely slept, surviving on coffee and adrenaline, while he and Richard chased digital shadows through medical records, corporate registries, and financial transactions that spiraled through dozens of shell companies. They worked from a sealed office Richard had installed years ago, hidden behind a false wall in the building's subbasement. No one knew it existed except the architect who designed it, and he'd died 5 years back. The room was small, cramped, filled with computer terminals and filing cabinets stuffed with documents Richard had secretly copied over the years. Evidence he'd collected but never acted on, insurance policies he'd never cashed. Looking at it all, Marcus realized Richard Barrett had known something was wrong for a long time. He'd just been too afraid to face it. Here, Richard said, pointing at a screen displaying transaction records. 3 facilities, one in Nevada, one in Oklahoma, one in upstate New York, all receiving monthly payments from the same medical logistics company. All registered under different names, but the payment amounts match exactly. Marcus leaned closer, studying the numbers. $50,000 per month to each location. Enough to maintain long-term care, enough to keep someone comfortable, enough to keep someone quiet. Which one? Marcus asked. I don't know. We need to check all three. Richard pulled up satellite imagery of each facility. The Nevada location looked like a private hospital. Oklahoma was more isolated, resembling a rehabilitation center. New York appeared to be a psychiatric facility built into the mountains. We don't have time to check all three. Patricia's already talking to the SEC. Marcus felt frustration building in his chest. How do we narrow it down? Richard was quiet for a moment, then pulled up another file. Your father worked in data security before he moved to financial oversight. He understood encryption, digital safety protocols. If he's being held somewhere, he'd need those skills suppressed. You think they drugged him? I think they did whatever was necessary to keep him silent. Richard's voice was heavy with guilt. The psychiatric facility makes the most sense. It's designed to hold people who might be considered unreliable witnesses. Easy to discredit anyone who comes from there. Marcus stared at the New York facility on the screen. Mountainside Wellness Center. The name was designed to sound peaceful, therapeutic. But the building looked like a prison, all high fences and security cameras. We need help, Marcus said. Someone who can access their patient records without triggering alerts. I know someone. Richard pulled out a burner phone, one of several he'd acquired. Cybersecurity specialist. She's helped me before with sensitive investigations. Can you trust her? I don't know, but we're out of options. Richard made the call. 20 minutes later, a woman in her early 30s arrived at the hidden office, looking nervous. She had sharp features, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and the wary eyes of someone who'd seen too much corporate ugliness. Sarah Chun. She introduced herself to Marcus. I work in the IT security division. Or I did, until they started asking questions about my access logs. They're watching you? Richard asked. Everyone's being watched now. Ever since Marcus broke into Patricia's office, the whole building's on lockdown. Internal Affairs is interviewing everyone, checking every keystroke, every file access. Sarah looked at Marcus. You're lucky you got out when you did. They're looking for you. Police. Private security. Patricia's convinced the board you're part of some conspiracy to take down the company. Marcus felt his stomach turn. I was trying to expose her. I know. I've been watching the same accounts you have. The irregular transfers, the shell companies. I've known something was wrong for months, but I couldn't prove anything without risking my job. Sarah pulled out a laptop. That's why when Mr. Barrett called, I came. Because I'm tired of watching them steal. She connected her laptop to Richard's system and started typing rapidly. Code scrolled across the screen, complex algorithms Marcus couldn't follow. Mountainside Wellness Center has decent security, but they're using outdated encryption, Sarah said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Government contract facility, which means lots of paperwork and bureaucracy, but also predictable patterns. Give me 20 minutes. She worked in silence while Marcus paced, and Richard made calls to lawyers, preparing for the legal battle coming. Every few minutes, Richard's phone buzzed with updates from his tracking app. Patricia was moving between buildings, meeting with executives, spinning her narrative. Walsh was at a bank, likely moving money. The SEC commissioner had returned to her office, probably drafting subpoenas. Got it, Sarah finally said. Patient database. I'm downloading the full registry now. The file loaded onto Richard's computer. Hundreds of names, most accompanied by photos and admission dates. Sarah ran a search for David Williams, but nothing came up. Try alternate names, Marcus said, his voice tight. Fake identities. Whatever they would have used to hide him. Sarah nodded and started searching by admission date instead, pulling up every male patient admitted 12 years ago, within a 6-month window of when David disappeared. There were 7. Richard leaned over her shoulder, studying the photos. Most were clearly not David Williams. Wrong age, wrong race, wrong everything. But the 6th photo made Richard go completely still. That's him, Richard whispered. That's David. Marcus moved closer, his heart hammering. The photo showed a man in his 40s with graying hair and tired eyes. He looked thinner than Marcus remembered, older, worn down by years of captivity. But the shape of his face, the set of his jaw, the way his eyes looked at the camera with quiet defiance. That was his father. The name listed was Michael Thompson. Admission reason: delusional disorder with paranoid features. Legal guardian: Patricia Sterling. Marcus felt rage explode through his chest. She's his legal guardian? It's how they control long-term patients, Sarah explained quietly. If someone's deemed mentally incompetent, the court assigns a guardian who makes all medical decisions. Keeps them medicated, keeps them isolated, keeps them from ever leaving. For 12 years, Marcus said, his voice breaking. She kept him locked up for 12 years. Richard grabbed Marcus's shoulder. We'll get him out. I promise you we'll get him out. How? We break in? We can't just storm a secure facility. No, but we can use legal channels. Richard pulled out his phone. I'll call my lawyers. We'll file for emergency guardianship transfer, claim patient abuse, demand immediate review. That'll take weeks, Sarah said. And the moment you file, Patricia will know. She'll move him or worse. The room fell silent. They were so close, but every path forward seemed blocked. Legal action would take too long. Direct action would get them arrested. And time was running out. Marcus stared at his father's photo, at the man who'd sacrificed everything to do the right thing. The man who disappeared so Marcus could survive. I'll go get him, Marcus said quietly. Marcus, you can't. I can and I will. Marcus turned to face Richard. You get the lawyers ready to legitimize it after. But I'm not leaving my father in that place one more day. You'll be arrested, possibly shot. Then help me not get caught. Marcus looked at Sarah. Can you disable their security systems? Sarah hesitated, then nodded slowly. Remotely, maybe, for a limited window. But if they realize what's happening, they'll lock down everything. How long can you give me? 30 minutes. Maybe 45 if I'm lucky. Then that's what we have. Marcus turned back to Richard. I need transportation, cash, and documents saying I'm authorized to transport him for medical evaluation. I'll have everything ready in 2 hours. Richard met his eyes. Marcus, if this goes wrong. It won't. But even as he said it, Marcus knew he was lying. Everything about this could go wrong. But his father had spent 12 years in hell because no one came for him. Marcus wouldn't make that mistake. While Richard arranged transportation and documents, Sarah worked on penetrating Mountainside's security network. Marcus sat in the corner, trying to calm his racing thoughts. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You have something that belongs to us. Marcus showed it to Richard. The billionaire's face went pale. They tracked you. Patricia's people. They know you have the flash drive. Let them come. Marcus, they're not going to ask nicely. They'll take it by force if necessary. Another text arrived. Return what you stole and walk away. This is your only warning. Marcus typed back. I'm not giving you anything. And I'm coming for what you stole from me. He hit send before Richard could stop him. The response came immediately. Then you've chosen poorly. They're going to come after you, Richard said. After both of us. Good. Let them try. Marcus stood up. While they're focused on us, they're not thinking about the facility. They're not preparing for what we're about to do. Sarah looked up from her computer. Security breach successful. I've got backdoor access to their system. But Marcus, you need to know something. Your father's file shows he's been heavily medicated for years. Antipsychotics, sedatives, drugs designed to keep him compliant. Even if you get him out, he might not be coherent. The words hit Marcus like a punch. All this time, all this searching, and his father might not even recognize him. Might not be able to testify. Might not be the witness they needed. I don't care, Marcus said. He's my father. I'm bringing him home. 6 hours later, Marcus was in the passenger seat of an unmarked van, driving through the dark toward upstate New York. Richard had arranged everything. Fake medical transport credentials, patient transfer authorization with forged signatures, even uniforms that matched the facility's approved vendors. Sarah was in the back with a laptop, monitoring security feeds in real time. 2 guards at the main entrance, Sarah reported. 3 more inside. Night shift is minimal, which works in our favor. But the nurse's station has direct sight lines to the patient wing where your father is being held. Can you create a distraction? Marcus asked. Already planned. At exactly 2:15 a.m., Every computer in the building will register a critical system error. They'll think they're being hacked, which technically they are. It'll pull staff toward IT and give you a clear path. The facility appeared ahead, perched on a hillside surrounded by woods. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter fence. Marcus could see guards patrolling, cameras mounted every 20 feet. This wasn't a wellness center. This was a prison dressed up with therapeutic language. Richard pulled the van up to the gate. A guard approached, shining a flashlight through the window. "We're here for patient transfer," Richard said calmly, handing over the forged documents. "Michael Thompson, emergency medical evaluation at Westfield Memorial." The guard studied the papers, then checked a clipboard. "I don't have any transfer scheduled for tonight. It's emergency authorization. Called in 2 hours ago. Check with your supervisor." The guard's radio crackled. Sarah had triggered the first phase, spoof call records showing a transfer request. The guard frowned, spoke into his radio, waited. Finally nodded. "All right, but you'll need escort to the patient wing." "Policy." "Understood." They drove through the gate. Marcus's hands were sweating despite the cold. Everything depended on the next 20 minutes. If anything went wrong, if anyone recognized them, if the documentation failed scrutiny, they'd be arrested immediately. The guard led them inside through sterile hallways that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Marcus could hear patients behind locked doors, crying, yelling, the sounds of people who'd been forgotten by the world. "System's about to go down," Sarah whispered through their earpieces. 60 seconds. They reached the patient wing. The guard swiped his key card, and the door clicked open. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed over a nurse's station where 2 women sat reviewing charts. "Transfer for Thompson," the guard announced. One nurse looked up, confused. "What transfer? I wasn't notified." "Emergency authorization," Richard repeated, handing over more papers. The nurse took them, started reading. That's when every computer screen in the building went black. Alarms started wailing. Red emergency lights began flashing. "What the hell?" The nurse jumped up, rushing toward a terminal. Other staff appeared from rooms, panicking, shouting about system breaches. "Now," Sarah's voice commanded in their earpieces. Marcus moved. While everyone was distracted, he slipped past the nurse's station toward the patient rooms. Numbers on doors: 201, 203, 205. He found 207 and pushed inside. A man sat on the bed, staring at nothing. Gray hair, vacant eyes, the ghost of someone Marcus once knew. He wore institutional clothing and hospital bracelet. His hands trembled slightly. "Dad," Marcus whispered. The man's eyes shifted slowly toward him. For a moment, there was nothing. Then something flickered. Recognition? Hope? Fear? "Dad, it's Marcus. Your son. I'm getting you out of here." David Williams blinked. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Years of medication had stolen his voice, his clarity, maybe his mind entirely. Marcus moved to his side, gently taking his arm. "Can you walk?" David nodded slowly, mechanically. Marcus helped him stand. His father felt light, fragile, like he might break at any moment. They moved back into the hallway. The chaos had intensified. Staff were running between rooms, trying to manually access patient files. The guard who'd escorted them was arguing with the head nurse about security protocols. Richard appeared, pushing a wheelchair. "Get him in." Marcus helped his father into the chair. David went without resistance, his eyes still distant and confused. They moved quickly toward the exit, trying to look official and calm, while Marcus's heart threatened to explode from his chest. "Stop!" A voice behind them. The head nurse, her eyes sharp with sudden understanding. "Who authorized this transfer? Show me proper credentials." "We show them the desk." Richard called back, not stopping. "I want to see them again. Now." They were almost at the main entrance. Almost free. Sarah's voice crackled, security override failing. "They're regaining system control. You have maybe 2 minutes." The nurse was following them now, joined by a security officer. "Stop, or I'm calling the police." Marcus pushed the wheelchair faster. They burst through the front entrance into cold night air. The van was 50 feet away. "Stop them!" the nurse screamed. Guards at the gate started moving. Richard jumped into the driver's seat, while Marcus lifted his father from the wheelchair and practically threw him into the back of the van. He climbed in after, pulling the door shut just as Richard gunned the engine. The van shot forward. Guards shouted, reaching for weapons they weren't fast enough to draw. The gate was still open from their entry. Richard aimed straight for it, the van's tires screaming on pavement. They burst through the gate and onto the mountain road. Behind them, alarms wailed and lights flooded the facility. But they were moving, accelerating down the winding road into darkness. Marcus held his father, who sat limply against him, still not speaking. "You're safe now," Marcus whispered. "You're safe." But David Williams just stared ahead with empty eyes, and Marcus realized getting him out was only the beginning. Bringing him back might be impossible. They drove for 2 hours before stopping at a safe location Richard had arranged, a private medical clinic run by a doctor who owed Richard favors and didn't ask questions. The doctor examined David while Marcus paced outside the examination room, his mind racing through everything that had just happened. Sarah had disappeared, covering her digital tracks. Richard was on the phone with lawyers, explaining what they'd done and preparing for the fallout. Because it would be fallout. They'd just broken a patient out of a secure facility. No amount of money or legal manipulation could make that simply disappear. The doctor emerged, her face grave. He's severely overmedicated. Years of antipsychotics, sedatives, drugs I wouldn't give to someone unless they were violently psychotic. His cognitive function is suppressed. Memory is fragmented. He knows something's wrong, but can't articulate it. "Can you fix him?" Marcus asked desperately. "I can start weaning him off the medications, but it'll take weeks, maybe months. And there's no guarantee he'll fully recover. The brain damage from long-term use of these drugs can be permanent." Marcus felt something break inside him. They'd found his father, rescued him, but he might never truly come back. The man Patricia Sterling had locked away might be lost forever. "Do everything you can," Marcus said quietly. "Whatever he needs, whatever it costs." The doctor nodded and returned inside. Richard approached, his phone still in hand. The facilities filed a police report. "Kidnapping, assault, theft. They're claiming we forcibly removed a patient under proper legal guardianship." Richard's jaw tightened. Patricia filed the complaint personally. She's playing the concerned guardian whose mentally ill ward was stolen by criminals. "We have proof she's been stealing from your company. Proof she'll claim we fabricated. Proof obtained through a legal office entry by you." Richard ran his hands through his hair. "She's framing this perfectly. We look like the criminals. She looks like the victim. So what do? We go public. Immediately. Before she can control the narrative completely." Richard pulled out the flash drive Marcus had stolen from Patricia's office. "We release everything. The financial records, the shell companies, the evidence of fraud. We force the investigation into the open where she can't hide it. And my father? When she claims we kidnapped a mental patient, who's going to believe anything he says? That's a risk we have to take. Because if we don't act now, she'll have us arrested before morning, and your father will disappear again. This time for good." Marcus looked through the window at his father, who sat on the examination table staring at his own hands like they belonged to someone else. 12 years stolen. A mind shattered by drugs. A life erased. "Do it," Marcus said. "Release everything." Richard made the calls. Within an hour, journalists at 3 major newspapers received encrypted files containing Patricia Sterling's financial records. Evidence of embezzlement, money laundering, corporate fraud spanning 12 years. Evidence of payments to Mountainside Wellness Center and 2 other facilities. Evidence of a systematic operation to steal from Barrett Technologies while framing the CEO. But Patricia Sterling wasn't finished. As dawn broke over the city, federal agents surrounded the medical clinic. Marcus watched through the window as they took up positions, weapons drawn. A loudspeaker crackled to life. "This is the FBI. We have warrants for the arrest of Richard Barrett and Marcus Williams. Exit the building with your hands raised. You have 2 minutes to comply." Richard's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his face went white. "They've frozen all my accounts. Seized company assets. The board just voted to remove me as CEO, pending investigation." "Patricia did this," Marcus said. She had help. SEC Commissioner Diane Foster signed emergency orders based on Patricia's testimony. They're claiming I've been embezzling money and that you're my accomplice. Richard's voice was hollow. She won. She outmaneuvered us completely. Marcus looked at his father, then at the federal agents outside, then at Richard Barrett. They were trapped. The evidence they'd released would take weeks to verify. Patricia's claims were immediate and backed by law enforcement. By the time anyone realized the truth, they'd be in prison. There has to be something, Marcus said desperately. Some way to prove she's lying. Richard's phone rang. He answered it, listened, and his expression changed from defeat to something else. Something that might have been hope. Sarah, he said after hanging up. She found something. A backup server Patricia didn't know existed. Original financial records from 12 years ago, before they were altered. And something else. Richard looked at Marcus. Communications. Emails between Patricia and David from Wright before he disappeared. He was offering to testify, to provide evidence. She responded with threats, made clear what would happen if he spoke. That proved she was involved in his disappearance. More than that, one of the emails references others. Thomas Walsh, SEC Commissioner Foster, 3 board members. Richard's voice grew stronger. This wasn't just Patricia stealing money. This was a conspiracy to take over the entire company. They've been planning it for 12 years. Then we give that to the FBI. No. Richard's eyes hardened. We give it to everyone. Media, regulators, Congress. We release it everywhere at once, so they can't bury it. Let Patricia try to spin her way out of evidence that damns them all. The loudspeaker crackled again. 1 minute. Exit now, or we're coming in. Richard looked at Marcus. Last chance to walk away. You could claim you were just an employee, that you didn't know what I was doing. They might believe you. Marcus thought about running, about saving himself, about letting Richard take the fall alone. Then he looked at his father, broken but alive, living proof of what Patricia Sterling was capable of. Send it, Marcus said. Send everything. Richard's fingers flew across his phone. Upload complete. Within seconds, the files were spreading across the internet. News sites, social media, government servers. Evidence of corruption so massive it couldn't be ignored or hidden. Outside, the FBI agents' radios started crackling with new orders. Confusion spread through their ranks as they received updates about the evidence now flooding public channels. And somewhere across the city, Patricia Sterling's phone began ringing with calls she couldn't answer, questions she couldn't spin, evidence she couldn't deny. The trap had closed, but they closed it around everyone, including themselves. Marcus sat down beside his father and took his hand. We did it, Dad. We finished what you started. David Williams squeezed his son's hand weakly, and for the first time in 12 years, something that might have been understanding flickered in his eyes. Outside, the dawn was breaking, and nothing would ever be the same. The FBI standoff lasted 18 hours. During that time, the world outside transformed. News networks ran continuous coverage of the leaked documents. Financial analysts dissected shell company structures on live television. Congressional committees announced emergency hearings. Stock in Barrett Technologies plummeted, then recovered, then plummeted again as investors struggled to understand what was real. Inside the clinic, Marcus sat with his father while lawyers negotiated through the door. David Williams drifted in and out of awareness, sometimes recognizing Marcus, sometimes staring through him at ghosts only he could see. The doctor continued reducing his medications, but warned that clarity might never fully return. Marcus, his father said suddenly, his voice rough from years of silence. Marcus, is that you? Yeah, Dad. I'm here. David's eyes focused, really focused for the first time. They told me you died. Patricia said there was an accident, that everyone was gone. Marcus felt his chest constrict. I'm alive. Uncle Ray, too. We made it. Ray. David's face crumpled. I couldn't protect you. Couldn't warn you. They kept me so confused, so lost. Every time I remembered something, they'd increase the medication. His hand gripped Marcus's with surprising strength. What year is it? 2026. 12 years. The words came out like broken glass. 12 years gone. Before Marcus could respond, Richard appeared at the door. "We have a deal. The FBI will take us into custody, but we'll be released on bail pending investigation. More importantly, they're executing warrants on Patricia Sterling, Thomas Walsh, and 6 others right now. The emails Sarah found were enough." "What about the SEC commissioner?" Marcus asked. "She resigned an hour ago. The email showed she received payments from one of Patricia's shell companies. She's finished." Richard looked exhausted but determined. "It's falling apart for them. Everything they built is collapsing." 2 hours later, Marcus and Richard were processed at a federal building downtown. Fingerprints, photos, charges read aloud. Conspiracy, fraud, kidnapping. The kidnapping charge stung because Marcus knew exactly what he'd done and why. But the lawyers promised it wouldn't stick once David could testify. They were released on bail just as the sun set. Outside, reporters swarmed them with cameras and microphones. Marcus pushed through without speaking, but Richard stopped. Patricia Sterling embezzled over $70 million from Barrett Technologies over the past 12 years, Richard said directly into the cameras. She imprisoned David Williams, a whistleblower who tried to expose her, and kept him medicated and silenced in a psychiatric facility for over a decade. The evidence is public. The truth is public. And justice is coming. The reporters exploded with questions, but Richard was already moving toward the waiting car. Inside, Sarah sat with a laptop, monitoring the aftermath. 3 board members have resigned, she reported. Walsh attempted to flee the country, but was stopped at the airport. Patricia's been taken into custody, but her lawyers are claiming the emails were fabricated. They're already trying to discredit everything. Can they succeed? Marcus asked. Not likely. The backup server has metadata proving when the emails were written. Original timestamps, IP addresses, digital signatures. It's authentic, and they know it. Sarah pulled up a news feed showing Patricia being escorted into a federal building. But she'll fight. People like her always do. Over the next week, the investigation exploded into every corner of Barrett Technologies. Federal agents occupied entire floors. Executives turned on each other, offering testimony in exchange for reduced sentences. Thomas Walsh became a cooperating witness, revealing offshore accounts and money laundering operations that went beyond anything Richard had imagined. Marcus stayed at the clinic with his father, watching him slowly emerge from the fog of medication. Some days were better than others. Some days, David remembered everything clearly, spoke about the fraud he discovered, the threats Patricia had made, the night men came to his apartment and told him he was having a mental health crisis. Other days, he forgot Marcus's name and asked for his wife, dead now for 19 years. Will he be able to testify? Marcus asked the doctor during one of David's bad days. Maybe. His lucid periods are increasing. With time and proper therapy, he might recover enough to give a coherent statement. The doctor hesitated. But Marcus, you need to prepare yourself. Even in his best moments, he's not the man you remember. That man was stolen from him. What's left is something different. Marcus understood. His father had been broken in ways that couldn't be fully repaired. But broken didn't mean useless. Broken didn't mean he couldn't still fight. 3 weeks after the raid, David Williams gave his first official statement to federal prosecutors. Marcus sat beside him, watching his father speak slowly but clearly about finding irregular payments, about confronting Patricia Sterling, about her threats, and the night he was forcibly committed to Mountainside Wellness Center. She told me no one would believe a word I said, David testified, his voice steady despite trembling hands. She told me I'd disappear, and everyone would forget I existed. She was almost right. The prosecutors recorded every word. When they finished, the lead attorney looked at Marcus and Richard with something like respect. This is the most comprehensive case of corporate fraud and false imprisonment I've seen in 20 years, she said. Ms. Sterling is facing life in prison. So are several of her co-conspirators. You did that. Both of you. But Marcus didn't feel victorious. He felt tired. His father was alive, but damaged. Richard's company was in chaos. Sarah had lost her job for helping them. The cost of truth had been staggering. 2 months later, Patricia Sterling stood trial. The courtroom was packed with journalists, investors, former employees seeking justice. Marcus sat in the front row beside his father and Richard. Uncle Ray was there too, healthier now, his eyes sharp as he watched the woman who destroyed his brother. Patricia's lawyers fought brilliantly. They challenged evidence, questioned witnesses, suggested that Richard Barrett had orchestrated everything to cover his own crimes. But the emails were undeniable. The offshore accounts were traced. The facility records showed Patricia had been paying for David's imprisonment personally. When David took the stand, the courtroom went silent. He walked slowly, Marcus guiding him to the witness box. He looked smaller than he should, older than his years. But when he spoke, his voice carried weight. "I found proof of theft," David said. "Proof that could have saved the company millions. I brought it to Patricia Sterling because she was chief operating officer. Because I trusted her." He looked directly at Patricia, who sat stone-faced at the defense table. She smiled at me, thanked me for my diligence. Then she had me committed to a psychiatric facility where I spent 12 years being told I was insane. 12 years losing my memory, my mind, my life. Because I tried to do the right thing. Patricia's expression never changed. But her lawyers knew it was over. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts: embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, false imprisonment, money laundering. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. Patricia Sterling received 25 years in federal prison. Thomas Walsh got 15. The board members who'd conspired with them received various sentences. SEC Commissioner Foster was separately charged and convicted. Barrett Technologies restructured completely. Richard stepped down as CEO voluntarily, though he retained ownership. He created an independent oversight board with external auditors and whistleblower protections written into the corporate charter. "Your father's name should be on this building," Richard said during the dedication ceremony. "He saved this company by refusing to stay silent. The least I can do is make sure no one else ever suffers for telling the truth." The David Williams Integrity Fund was established with $50 million from Richard's personal fortune. It provided legal defense and financial support for corporate whistleblowers, helped fund investigations into workplace fraud, and offered counseling for people who'd suffer retaliation for speaking up. Marcus stood at the dedication, his father beside him in a wheelchair, Uncle Ray on the other side. Sarah Chun was there too, now heading the company's new ethics division with a salary that reflected her courage. The former food server, the broken whistleblower, the billionaire who'd finally found his conscience, and the cybersecurity specialist who'd risked everything. They'd all paid different prices for the same truth. 6 months after the trial, Marcus returned to Westbrook, not to the cramped apartment where he'd struggled to survive, but to the site where Miller's roadside diner had once stood. Richard had purchased the property and funded construction of something new, the Westbrook Community Center. It offered job training, legal assistance, financial counseling, and mental health services. All free, all focused on helping people who'd been pushed to the margins, who fought every day just to survive, who needed someone to believe they mattered. Marcus ran the center. His father visited twice a week, some days lucid enough to speak with people who came seeking help, sharing his story as a cautionary tale and proof that even the most broken things could find purpose. Uncle Ray worked there too, coordinating the medical assistance program, making sure people like him, poor, sick, forgotten, could get the medications and care they needed. On opening day, Marcus stood in the main lobby and looked at the framed receipt hanging on the wall. The same receipt he'd written his message on, the $1,000 that had started everything. Richard had preserved it exactly as Marcus had left it, a reminder that small acts of integrity could topple empires. Beneath the receipt, a plaque read, "The smallest thing we ignore often reveals the biggest truth." People filed into the center throughout the day. Single mothers seeking job training. Elderly folks needing help with medical bills. Young people looking for mentorship. Each one was greeted with dignity, offered assistance without judgment, treated like they mattered. Because they did. Richard appeared in the afternoon. No longer the cold billionaire Marcus had first served at a struggling diner. He'd aged in the past year, the weight of his choices etched into his face. But there was peace there too, the peace that came from finally doing right. "Your father would be proud," Richard said quietly, watching Marcus help a teenager fill out job applications. My father is proud, Marcus corrected. He's upstairs right now, telling someone about the importance of speaking up even when it costs you everything. Richard smiled. I'm proud too, for whatever that's worth. It's worth something. Marcus extended his hand. It's worth a lot. They shook hands, no longer divided by wealth or power or past failures. Just two men who'd learned that integrity wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing right when wrong would be easier. About refusing to look away when looking away would be profitable. About understanding that the measure of a life wasn't what you accumulated, but what you stood for when the world tried to break you. That evening, after the center closed, Marcus sat alone in the quiet lobby. His phone showed messages from Sarah about expansion plans, from lawyers about ongoing restitution cases, from his father's doctors about continued improvement. But what Marcus kept returning to was a simple truth. He'd return $1,000 because someone had once taught him that character was what you did when nobody was watching. That one choice, made in a moment of desperate poverty, had exposed corruption, freed his father, and changed countless lives. The miracle was never the money. The miracle was what refusing it had revealed. And now, in this building where forgotten people found hope, in this community where integrity mattered more than wealth, Marcus Williams understood what his father had known 12 years ago. Some things are worth losing everything for. Truth was one of them. Justice was another. And the chance to look yourself in the mirror and know you'd chosen right. That was worth more than any amount of money anyone could ever forget on a table. Marcus stood, turned off the lights, and locked the door behind him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new people needing help, new battles for justice. But tonight, he allowed himself to feel what had been missing for so long. Peace. His father was alive. The truth had won. And the boy who'd once counted pennies to survive had become a man who helped others do more than survive. He helped them live with dignity. And that was the greatest fortune of all. If you were drowning in poverty and found money that could save everything you love, would you have the strength to give it back? Like and subscribe for more stories about integrity, justice, and the courage to choose right when wrong would be so much easier.